Hi, and welcome to Filmmakers Compass Podcast, a show where we talk about movies and, well, more movies. I'm D-Man, joined by CP. How you doing today, CP?
I'm doing pretty good, dude. How are you? How was your Veterans Day?
You know what? I ended up having a great holiday. As per usual, I almost always have a good time. And just want to give a big shout out and thank you to all our veterans out there, all of our listeners, and really all of them. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
So, before we get into the episode this week, CP, I did want to say that I am rocking a rather amazing Star Wars sweatshirt in honor of our topic this week.
You actually are rocking a rather amazing Star Wars sweatshirt.
Yeah,
I can confirm.
It's the entire sweatshirt is sky colored for the planet of Hoth, and then at the bottom, it literally has the Battle of Hoth around the sweatshirt. It's pretty dope. And we're going to talk a little bit about Star Wars today. So I'm very excited.
You mean spoiler, we might be talking about Star Wars on an episode of this podcast, D-Man?
Yeah,
I'm sure everyone is
pumped.
shocked.
So I tried to pull a CP and wear something that I thought would fit the content of the episode. And hopefully all of you listeners out there appreciate this sweatshirt, because I do.
I appreciate it. So good job.
All right, well, let's go ahead and jump into our shout-outs this week. So first of all, CP, we got to give a huge shout-out and thank you to Niall for coming on the show. And of course, a big apology on my behalf, which I know you guys sort of addressed it. I don't know if you got into the nitty-gritty, but I ended up having jury duty. And there was a bit of a mix-up where I had the letter and I hadn't responded to it. And then it came to my attention and I went and looked, and literally it was like, you need to report tomorrow. And I was like, well, we're recording tomorrow. And then I was like, I gotta go. So thankfully I didn't get selected for jury duty. They were looking for somebody to do like 16 days, which is quite a long time.
Would have been awesome, dude.
I just had to go for one day, but it did take all day. I got there in the morning and I didn't leave till I want to say like 3 or 3:30. So as predicted, I was like, it's probably just going to be me sitting around watching videos on my phone for, 5-6 hours. And it was. But I guess that's not the worst thing. I also had a chance while I was there to listen to the podcast. So again, Niall, I really appreciate it. And obviously, I think you did a great job. And hopefully we can have you back on the show and I will actually be on the episode. So that would be incredible. I got to give a big shout out to Ivor. I want to say it was great to see you, man, at the Halloween party. And CP, I have another apology. And this may not be shocking like jury duty was, but I got super drunk. And I went to 2 Halloween parties in one night. And basically what happened was I went to the first Halloween party, Dodger game, World Series. We do a couple shots. And then everybody's coming, they're arriving for the Halloween party, and I got to take off to go to the second party. So what do? Everybody wants to do a shot with you before you leave. So then I leave, I go to the second party. Well, I got there late, and what does everybody want to do? They want to do a shot with you. So we're doing shots to celebrate the Dodgers. I had to do a shot because I was dressed as Thor, which was actually an incredible costume. Steph was Loki. And I thought we knocked it out of the park, especially, Loki after the show being able to pull off variants. Did you see the costume?
Yes. As did everyone in the community, because we posted it.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty sweet. Like I had the wig, I had the hammer, the whole thing. I wasn't a huge fan of the actual costume at first because it was one of those print instead of textured costumes, like little kids.
Yeah.
But it ended up working really well. I thought the costume hit. Everybody loved it. We even, at one of the parties we were at, we won a costume contest as Thor and Loki. So it was pretty dope. But anyway, on that note, Ivor was at the Halloween party, although not in costume, which Ivor, come on, man. I'm just kidding. He got there.
I'm a little disappointed. You should have worn a costume, man.
He got there a little bit late, but let's just say at one point I was face down on a couch, passed out, needed a timeout, Then I popped back up, and then I popped back up again, and I was like, I'm leaving. I'm just getting an Uber. I was like, I gotta go home. I'm done.
Dude.
Hey, Halloween, we raged a little bit.
This is so typical D-Man. Well, I'm just bummed because apparently Ivor D-Man hangs out with you all the time, and I never get to.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I mean, we had a little bit of good conversation, but we didn't get anywhere near as deep as last year. Last year we had some great sports conversations, movies conversations in person. So I'm a little bit sorry that didn't happen. But funny story, Ivor left right before I left. Now, as I mentioned, I was hammered and ordered an Uber. Well, I walked outside and a car was driving by and I thought it was my Uber and I tried to get in. It was Ivor. So he can
nothing about this story surprises me in any way. Like, it really doesn't.
Confirm or deny, that's up to him. But no, I had a great time. So CP, next up on our shout outs, I did want to say RIP to Terry Garr. Sad passing. And Ivor did chime in and said, do you remember the chemistry between her and David Letterman? Always comedic magic. So appreciate the comment and RIP.
RIP.
Next up on our shoutouts is Jason Michael Carls on Screen said, it's a classic. The problem I have is that it feels disjointed. I wish the killer had a motive for killing them. It's as if they just killed for fun. I'd rather be connected to Sydney in some way. So this is a reference to, I think, the Drew Barrymore and even the principal killing, where there were murders around the town in the movie Scream that weren't necessarily connected to that
Sidney
backstory.
Prescott,
The Sidney Prescott backstory. And so I think they were pointing out that they're like, yes, they were kind of serial killing, but at that point, the movie at the end makes it seem like it was all done for this very clear motive, but you kind of got to suspend disbelief because that's what keeps the people guessing, I think they were doing it so that you couldn't pin it on that motive because it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So, but I appreciate the comment. Thank you for chiming in. And then Drucker sent us a video of some kids turning into Transformers. And
I saw it and it was awesome.
They were winning Halloween. It looked pretty dope. And I think he sent us that because we just did an episode on Transformers 1 and really Transformers in general. So that was pretty sweet. CP, how was your Halloween?
My Halloween was good. Oh, I forgot. I told everybody, but you weren't on that episode, were you?
No. And I haven't talked to you about it, honestly.
Yeah. My Halloween was good. It was the same weekend as SD Comic Fest. So between holiday parties and the Comic Fest, I was just exhausted by the time the weekend finished. I was like, man, I need to just take a day of catch up.
I did get to watch Ghostbusters. It was amazing.
Well, that's good.
It really was. Like, I haven't seen it in a while, and it was a great watch. Started it right at the very end of the night and just closed out Halloween with a Ghostbusters.
Nice. Always a good choice.
And a beer.
Classic D-man. You're living up to all the worst stereotypes of you, man, or the best stereotypes.
Halloween was a blast. So, and then finally, I want to give a huge shout out to Catnip the movie. And for that, CP, I'm going to throw it over to you if you want to go ahead and plug Catnip again.
I mean, we talked about it last week. So if it sounds like a movie that you're into, you should check it out. Go to the website, catnipmoviecampaign.com or catnipthemovie.com. And we'll leave it at that. We had a good conversation.
All right. Enough of that. CP, you know what time it is. It is now time for our box office breakdown.
Box office breakdown. Sorry, your cat impression threw me off a little bit. All right, everyone. So let's get into the box office this week. So a couple new movies have recently premiered and they are in the top 5. So number 5, Smile 2, still sticking around even though it is post Halloween.
Yeah, I mean, I figure that's about to fall out. That's probably the end of its run.
Total gross there is $60 million. I think it was made for about 30, so not a bad payday.
Profitable.
Not a bad payday at all.
Yep, everybody got paid. That's a win-win-win. Maybe not the studio, but
and that was at number 3, the
previous week.
around Thanksgiving weekend. So Halloween weekend.
Yeah,
Thanksgiving is not here yet. Number 4, The Wild Robot, and that has fallen from number 2 previously. That's made $130 million in total. So again, not a bad run at the box office.
Yeah, we've talked about it, how like with The Wild Robot, like if that were a Pixar film, because those cost, upwards of 200 million to produce, not even counting marketing budgets, that would probably be underwhelming for like Pixar. But the thing is, they really budgeted for this thing. And I think they're in profitable territory, which is quite
Well,
remarkable.
and that 130 is just the total domestic gross. That does not consider the worldwide gross, which brings it up to around $300 million in total. So definitely
Yeah,
a
that's
good payday
impressive.
for Universal. So
And
number three, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and it's cool to see some of these movies reining in their budgets a little bit because some of this stuff's getting out of hand. Like I saw the other day that um one of the Disney Plus shows, it costs like $230 million to make. And it was like, how did they I think it was the Acolyte,
Yeah,
Star Wars. Cost 230 million. They said it was like $28 million an episode.
that's
And I was
insane.
like, dude, that's like bigger than most movies.
I know, right?
I don't know how you can turn a profit there. And then you look at, like I said, the Pixar budgets and stuff. It's cool to see them sort of reining it in and still getting a quality movie out of it. That's awesome.
So new this week is the movie The Best Christmas Pageant Ever. So we are now officially in Christmas movie season. I don't know if you saw it, D-Man.
I did not see it. I know that and Red One were coming out kind of back to back.
I have not seen it yet. It has made almost $11 million in opening weekend. So we'll see how that does. That was released by Lionsgate. I actually know a friend who was involved with the editing of it, and he said it's actually
Oh,
really
nice.
funny. Yeah. Maybe we'll have to have him on the show later. Number
Cool.
two, new from A24, Heretic. This is the first weekend in the theater. That also made
Is that
close
Hugh
to
Grant?
yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
As a
Yes.
psycho? Yeah.
Yes. It made close to 11 million or just over $11 million domestically, but it made about $3 million internationally. So it's around $14 million total. So, I mean,
That
it's an
sounds like it
A24,
could be a
so
wash. I doubt it's going to get over like 35 million.
probably not. And then number one in the box office is Venom, The Last Dance. D-Man, have you seen it?
I did see Venom. Yes.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, I had a good time. I mean, the way I would describe it, if anybody was asking me, thumbs up, thumbs down, I would say that if you enjoyed the first two Venoms, then thumbs up. If you didn't, then thumbs down. I think it is sort of a decent end as a trilogy. Doesn't seem like it's going to end at a trilogy. I'm not going to spoil it, but I mean, it seems like there's opportunity for more Venom stuff. But
Yep.
basically, yeah, I don't think it's anything that excels past what you've seen before, and it
Yep.
definitely doesn't suck if you like the other ones. So, I mean, that's how I describe it.
Fair enough. I was not a big fan. I
I did
was
see, yeah, I saw
very
your
disappointed.
video. I mean, it's definitely not like a masterpiece by any means, but none of them are. I mean, if anything, at best, they're fun. And if you can bring that fun, then I think you could find yourself having a good time.
Well, despite not being a masterpiece, but being fun, it has made close to $400 million worldwide, about 115 million in the United States. So that's not a bad payday for Sony, especially
Dude.
when we compare it to some of the other Spider-Man related movies that Sony has released, mainly Madam Web, which
Yeah,
were both
Morbius.
abysmal.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. If it's going to bring in 400, $500 million, I think they're going to keep making them because
Yeah,
everybody's going to get paid out.
that's the
That's like
thing,
a great payday right there.
right? They have to keep the rights. So if they're getting paid to keep the rights, then yeah, it's worth it.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing. Everybody involved in the project is going to get a nice payday.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't, because obviously $500 million, where's all that going?
Yeah.
You did it. You won.
Yep. Yep.
And the fans
So
got what they wanted, more Venom.
more Venom. So that is the box office for this past weekend.
Fantastic. Well, as I mentioned at the top of the episode, CP. Okay, so now, P, we are actually going to be talking about my favorite movie of all time. And also something that I get really excited about, which this week we are going to be taking a look at the hero's journey. Overall, we're going to be looking at sort of a little bit of mythology and why these elements play in to some of our most classic and beloved stories. So I want to throw it over to you first. Talk a little bit about the monolith that is the hero's journey and sort of what is the breakdown of this actual process of the hero going on their journey.
Okay. So I think before we really get into it, let's talk about where it came from. So the hero's journey is the brainchild of Joseph Campbell. We've talked
Okay.
about it a lot on this podcast, but we've never actually talked about what it is and given the backstory. So Joseph Campbell was a university professor who was studying myth. And
Yes.
he realized that myths of different cultures, didn't matter where in the world they originated, had shared elements. And when you strip apart all of the language barriers, the cultural elements, and you strip all these stories that have originated on different continents, different communities around the planet, he found that there's a bunch of similarities. And he called this the monomyth. And so in psychology, there's this whole study of what Carl Jung talks about, which is the idea of archetypes. And so the Jungian archetype is the idea that there are elements, there are structures, there are symbols that, regardless of who you are, where you're from, as a human being, you innately understand these. So when we take what Jung says and combine it with what Joseph Campbell says, we get this idea of universal myth. And essentially, when Campbell boiled all those elements of what the monomyth is, he translated it into this very digestible thing called the hero's journey. And this is essentially the basis of storytelling.
Which is remarkable because I think, going back to the idea that Campbell's studying stories from all over the world, but not just all over the world, but from all different time periods. So you're going backwards into Shakespearean stories. You're going backwards into, King Arthur and Knights of the Round Table, Greek mythology, Beowulf, like all these things that, have been passed down through generations. But I think what really stands out to me that's fascinating is communication back in the day suggests that these cultures were not speaking to each other. It wasn't this culture saw this story from over here and then applied it within their own thing. No, they're just telling stories, throughout human history. And then you find out that there's all these connections. There's all these little dots that get connected between how humans communicate. And we end up with, I guess, his thesis on that, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, which is the book he wrote, and the hero's journey. So tell us a little bit about the actual journey now.
The actual journey now, huh? When we look at this monomyth, there's a couple main roles that every story has in common. And Campbell goes back to the point that storytelling, the original purpose of storytelling, right, is to pass valuable information from one generation to the next. And that's why, hundreds of thousands of years ago, we started telling stories as people.
Yeah.
To
cautionary tales.
To share valuable life
Yeah.
experience with the next generation and make sure that the species didn't die out. So when we look into it, it kind of goes, obviously there's lots of different interpretation of these, and Campbell breaks these down further and further the more you study his work. But it really kind of comes down to a few set archetypes. There's the hero, whose responsibility is to serve and sacrifice for the greater good of the community. There's the mentor who guides the hero on their quest. There are threshold guardians who are, these are the bosses at the end of every level who challenge the hero's progression through the story. There's the herald who comes at the beginning of the story to warn him or her of the challenge before them, of their hidden destiny, of the changing of eras. There's shapeshifters. These are the characters that appear in the story with the
can't trust them.
Right, causing deception for the for the greater plot, but also causing the character to question themselves. The shadow, and Campbell calls it the shadow because this is the true foil to the hero. And sometimes the shadow is the hero themselves, or a portion of them, right? Their psychology, their subconscious, things like that. And then there's tricksters. Their whole mission is to disrupt things. And sometimes,
I just think of Loki, like, isn't he the god of mischief? Like, he's a trickster that he just always is fooling around. He's always, messing with Thor. It's classic.
That's essentially the basis of storytelling. Now, these characters can be introduced in different levels. Sometimes you have one character who is fulfilling the role of two of those kind of distinct archetypes at the same time. They're not always bad. Like the trickster or the shapeshifter aren't necessarily deceitful, villainous characters, but
I
they
mean,
are
you probably could look at something like R2D2 and C3PO as maybe tricksters in that like they cause trouble and they get the hero into a situation, but they also might, through tricks get the hero out of the
yeah,
trouble.
their role, right, is to disrupt the flow of the story.
So I like that. That's cool. And I don't know. I think what's interesting too is when you actually look at the structure of how the stories are constructed, we think about it as these sort of fantastical or fantasy or science stories. You think of modern examples of the hero's journey are like Star Wars: A New Hope, Harry Potter, The Matrix. We've talked about these on the podcast before.
Dune. Yeah.
Yeah. You're sort of going from ordinary world. You have your call to adventure. Often the hero refuses the call. There's meeting the mentor, crossing the thresholds, tests, the ordeal, the climax, and then the road back or the resurrection. So you go through those sort of steps when, these characters get into a story like this. But overall, like, we also just tell stories like that. So if you think about it, like if I was to tell you about something that happened to me at a bar last night, I'd probably start out by like, all right, dude, so we're at home and this happens, ordinary world. But because something happened,
Anthony comes over and tells me that
shout out Anthony.
There's a Star Wars pop-up down the street.
Yeah, and they have blue milk, whatever. And you're like, oh, no way, call to adventure. And I'm like, oh, I can't go, dude. I got to work tomorrow. And then he ends up sending me photos from the thing. And I'm like, all right, I'm there. Screw work, and you end up going and doing that. And like, whatever, how these things happen. And it's like, that's how we tell stories, not just like movies or grand epics, but like the hero's journey is a template for just storytelling in general. It's actually quite remarkable.
When we think about storytelling, right, there's only a set number of conflicts that there are. And so what Campbell's doing is kind of stripping all those things back and boiling it down to the most distilled elements, right?
Ooh, I actually finished that story. So I would get to this Star Wars pop-up. I would tell you what it looked like. And the climax is that I actually shot a Greedo cosplayer. No, I'm kidding. So anyway, yeah, he confronted me and I had to take him out. So I thought you would like that story, CP. But anyway, yeah, no, it's like remarkable. You think about like, this is me just telling a story about last night, but then you could have, an example of like using the hero's journey and translating it to something like a marketing campaign. You have obviously a company story, their sort of origin story and how they arrived at the product that they're, helping people with. But then you have the customer journey itself, where this can be described as a hero's journey. You have a ordinary world, a customer with a problem. They end up maybe going the call to adventure. They go research this problem. They find tons of products and they feel lost. And then finally, like you, the mentor, the company with, the gifts, you step in and you're like, hey, here's the solution to your problem. And, then you go through all the trial and error of getting it to work. And eventually, hopefully you're successful and bam.
Okay. So like, as you're saying this, I'm thinking of like Nike. My problem is I'm in an ordinary world. I'm trying to get in shape.
Yep.
There's lots of challenges and it's scary. So I step into the extraordinary world of working out. I don't know where to go. So I turn to Nike and they say, if you get this shoe,
it will empower you
like a PF Flyer,
to achieve your,
it'll make me run faster and jump higher.
Yeah. But like it will help you achieve your workout goals. And then you go through, sort of the tests in which is working out and you try it. And yeah, like it was hard and this and that, but at the end, even when you wanted to give up, you kept going, just do it. And, by the end, you lost weight or, gained muscle or something. And then you have like some sort of transformation by the end. And you could see like this marketing journey, but it all goes back to storytelling and the hero's journey and something that Joseph Campbell picked up on. It's just amazing.
And I think what differentiates stories is the extraordinary world that the characters are entering and the theme, right? Because the theme that the storyteller is interested in is how we connect with the challenges and the journey that the character undergoes and what they've learned along the way, right?
Well, let's take a look at a movie. I mean, this is what I was talking about when we started this segment, which is probably the best example of the hero's journey ever translated to film, which is Star Wars, or if you want to get technical, Star Wars: A New Hope. But I call it Star Wars. Referring to Joseph Campbell and Hero with a Thousand Faces specifically, George Lucas, who wrote Star Wars and directed Star Wars, which obviously I think he's always associated with Empire and Return of the Jedi, but he didn't direct those. He directed A New Hope. And one of the things is he actually studied the work of Joseph Campbell. I believe he has even met Joseph Campbell. And there's a quote out there, I'm paraphrasing here, but Joseph Campbell said that George Lucas was the greatest student that he ever had.
That's
George
high
Lucas
praise.
Was really, really interested in mythology, what sort of the role that myths and story play in culture, how they build, like you said, how stories pass on, information or lessons or different things. He was fascinated by this, read Hero with a Thousand Faces, and literally built Star Wars: A New Hope using the template of the hero's journey. Now, the reason I want to use Star Wars here as the example is because Star Wars is probably our modern myth of today. It's one of the most popular stories ever told. It's actually being passed down now through generations, which, always associate, right? Movies themselves have only been around for a little over a century. That means that they all sort of have a shelf life of like anybody can go watch it. But Star Wars feels like that one that it's like you pass it down. It's a proud moment, for a parent to watch Star Wars with their kids, I imagine. So to our listeners, if you have kids and you watch Star Wars with them, let us know how that went. Hopefully good. But not only that, it's Star Wars, it's a large world and a continuing story, but there's something inherent about Star Wars that reaches beyond just a good movie. And I think that all goes back to the hero's journey. It's what George Lucas is tapping into here that just connects everybody on a deeper level than just a great film.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, and we can run down at CP. I mean, like literally.
No, let's do it.
You have Ordinary World, which is Luke Skywalker, farm kid on Tatooine. He dreams of going away to the, Imperial Academy and basically just getting out of there because there's just nothing there for him. The Call to Adventure, which is he finds these droids and he gets this distress message, right? Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. And he's like, oh, that's weird. Like, what do we do about that? In this case, like you mentioned, with the archetypes and in the structure of the story, classic hero's journey says that you go to refusal of the call and then meeting the mentor, meaning that when he would get the message, which was the call to adventure, that he would refuse that. But it actually swaps here in Star Wars where he meets Obi-Wan first. They go to try to rescue R2. And in doing so, he meets Obi-Wan. And then that's when Obi-Wan Kenobi asks him, hey, come with me to Alderaan. Is that a question? I don't know. Call to action.
And Luke refuses the call, right? No, I'll take you as far as
Anchorhead.
Yep.
Or Mos Eisley, wherever you're going. Yeah, he refuses the call. And Obi-Wan, actually, as a great mentor, goes ahead and empowers Luke and does not try to trick him. He does not try to force him. He just says, you must do what you feel is right, right? And if you think about it, Luke at this point has almost no agency. Tells his uncle that he wants to go to the academy. He's like, maybe next season. No. Shut down. He's like, oh, I wanted to go to Tashi's station to pick up some power converters. You can have fun with your friends later. Like, Luke's constantly sort of getting shut down. He goes to get the droids and then boom, he's getting attacked by sand people, or the Tusken Raiders. And it's like, here you can sense Obi-Wan. Not only do you have young and old and this sort of dichotomy that's very obvious to almost anybody that, has ever had a mentor, but you also have Obi-Wan empowering Luke, which is really cool. Teaching him. Then you have Crossing the Threshold, which really is that's when the hero commits to the journey. And this happens when
returns home.
Yeah, he returns home and finds that his aunt and uncle have been murdered. And he's like, he literally goes to Obi-Wan and he's like, there's nothing for me here now. I want to.
What does Obi-Wan tell him? Come with me to Alderaan. Learn the ways of Force.
I want to become a Jedi like my father. And then
and Luke has now entered the extraordinary world, which is not boring Tatooine with two suns. This is the world of the quest to become a Jedi Knight.
And it's literally visually shown as they go into Mos Eisley Spaceport. And then visually it's shown going into the Mos Eisley Cantina.
Mm-hmm.
He's in this whole new world, all these new aliens, all these new creatures. He's unfamiliar with being at a bar in general.
Mm-hmm.
Like he walks in and they're like, hey, they're not allowed in here. The droids go, oh, who?
Yeah. Yeah.
I've never really been here, so sorry. I didn't know. He even says sorry. That guy's like, I have the death sentence in 12 systems.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. He's like, you'll be dead. And you're like, oh my God, dude, I'm just trying to get a ship.
This
Like,
is totally
what is
different than
happening?
everything else that we know about
Yeah.
Tatooine. Yeah.
It's so well done to follow this hero's journey. And then obviously there's like the Test allies and enemies, which is, they meet Han Solo and Chewbacca. They're able to get a ship. They end up getting sucked into the tractor beam on the Death Star. They have to find a way to escape while also disabling the tractor beam. Then they team up with Princess Leia, but they lose Obi-Wan Kenobi, which is another general theme of the hero's journey, which is the mentor usually cannot continue on. I don't believe it's a direct step within the hero's journey, but that is a trope that we usually find, which is, hey,
usually the handoff from mentor to the hero is how the hero truly assumes their identity.
And then you have the ordeal, which is they finally, they do escape. Princess Leia has the Death Star plans and they have to go destroy the Death Star. So the reward being that, they're able to do that. But in this case, the reward being the metaphorical reward for Luke Skywalker. And as you mentioned at the top of this, thematically, what is Star Wars about? It's about believing in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, Luke seizes the reward of truly believing in himself in one of the most epic.
And putting his trust into the Force.
Yeah. One of the most epic scenes ever. I mean, it's like one of my favorite scenes in film. You have Darth Vader behind Luke in the Death Star trench. Luke's about to, he's got his targeting computer locked on to the exhaust port. He's like, here we go. Fire these torpedoes. We're going to blow up this Death Star. He has Darth Vader right behind him. The Force is strong with this one. And then you hear the Obi-Wan ghost voice. And he's like, use the Force, Luke. Let go, Luke. Luke, trust me. Luke switches off his targeting computer and you hear that guy, at the Yavin base. And he's just like, hey, Luke, what the hell? You switched off your targeting computer. What's wrong? And he's like, nothing. I'm all right. And every time I cheer, because that's the theme of Star Wars. That's the moment where he's like, nothing. I'm all right. And we're like, just like Luke, we're like, he's going to do it. There's no way he can't. There's no way he fails. There's just no way. So then you have his friend Han Solo comes back, saves the day. And you end up with them going back with the transformative, right? Luke's on his path to become a Jedi. Han Solo is no longer selfish. Chewbacca is the best co-pilot of all time. Princess Leia is now one of the true leaders of the rebellion, and the droids have been restored.
So let's take a step back. There are a bunch of characters that we kind of skipped over who are, as you mentioned before,
Darth Vader's one of them.
Darth Vader is the shadow. While we find out later on that he is, in fact, a true shadow of Luke by being what Luke could have become if he had succumbed to the dark side. In A New Hope, in the original Star Wars, he is the opposite of Luke, as in the gifted. He is the slayer of Luke's father at that time, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Luke's father is like Luke, who he could have become if he had not been killed and destroyed.
Yeah.
As Obi-Wan says, by Darth Vader.
Well, and so the thing is, you look at Darth Vader in the original Star Wars movie, because we always think of Darth Vader as his whole arc of the original trilogy, which is, right, he's this super, super evil dude. He's almost overtly bad to the degree that, like, the tragic arc is the reveal that instead of Luke's father having been killed by Darth Vader, he is Darth Vader. And then there's the redemption arc in Return of the Jedi, which is incredibly well done. But when you look at just A New Hope, I mean, he's a fairly stock villain.
Yeah.
He's not even really the main bad guy because you have Grand Moff Tarkin.
Yeah, who actually is the main villain, right?
Yeah,
he's the one who's positioned himself against the Alliance. He's the destroyer of Alderaan.
Yeah. Darth Vader is sort of playing role of right-hand man, but there's not a ton of characterization for Darth Vader other than sort of evil. I think the most he gets is his relationship with Obi-Wan. When I met you, I was but the learner, now I am the master, right? And this idea that Darth Vader himself kills his former mentor. I think that's where he has sort of the most characterization. This idea that he thinks if he kills Obi-Wan, he wins. And Obi-Wan is like, no.
Mhm.
I'm now one with the Force, and this kid is going to take up this mantle,
Yeah. As
which
a
is,
good mentor, he has complete faith in Luke,
yeah.
right?
So that's probably the most characterization for Vader in A New Hope.
No, I would agree. As you said, R2 and 3PO are there as tricksters to change the direction of events.
And they do. You think about that scene with C3PO where he has the intercom and he's talking to Luke and they're in the trash compactor, and then afterwards like the stormtroopers come in and he's like, help, help, they're on the third level or whatever.
Hmm, hmm.
He's tricking them. He's a trickster. He's like, oh, and then he gets out of there. He's like, I need to take my droid down to, or
Yeah.
my counterpart here, to maintenance.
Yep.
And he's like, and they're like, okay, go ahead.
Carry
And
on.
he gets out of it. It works really well. R2 often causes problems. He's known for this.
Hmm,
I think
hmm.
the most famous one is probably in Empire Strikes Back, though, where he falls in the water and then he gets eaten by the monster
Yep.
and then he gets spit out. It worked out, but yeah, like he's always doing things like that.
Han Solo is, I think, in many ways, Han Solo's just a shapeshifter, right?
Yeah, we
He
don't know,
changes his
especially in that
allegiance.
one.
We
Yeah,
don't know that he can be trusted in especially in A New Hope, right?
Lando is that in Empire.
Right. These are characters who are only out for themselves. They get redemption. They do affect the plot. I think what's really interesting in A New Hope with Han Solo's role is Han Solo is the one to challenge Obi-Wan on this version of the Force. He's like, no, there's no such thing as the Force. Like that's a bunch of hoodoo.
You old fool.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
I've never seen anything that would
He's
make me
taking
go.
this role of challenging Luke, who is now on this journey of Jedi knighthood with the non-believer.
Yeah, exactly. And it works. I think it plays really well. Again, sort of this selfish attitude of Han Solo would suggest that, right, he can't see outside of anything within his own world. I've never seen anything.
Mhm.
But what does that mean? Just because you've never seen it doesn't mean it's out there.
Mhm.
It's a very selfish way to look at the world. Like only your experience matters. And he starts to broaden his horizons as the trilogy goes on. Han Solo finds love. He finds greater depth to his friendships. I mean, say what you will. I know Chewie technically has a life debt to Han Solo, but that's never really explored within the context of the films. That was sort
No.
of like the legends. So we
Yep.
could safely assume that Chewie's, a friend and co-pilot.
Yep. Princess Leia is the herald, right? When
Yeah.
she appears in the video, the hologram, sorry, it's not a video. When she
Yeah.
appears in the hologram, that's the call to action that incites everything for Obi-Wan and Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, and she's she may not be a typical damsel in distress the way that you think, sort of feigning, oh my gosh, I need help.
Mhm.
She's sort of like a firecracker. So, Lucas is playing this a little bit different than maybe the traditional archetype
But
here.
playing into the traditional arc, she is a princess.
Yeah, she is a princess, Princess Leia. So, I don't know, I think there's so much about the way A New Hope works that using the hero's journey, it just taps in to the human storytelling element. We can't help but love it. It's almost like we can't help ourselves. Like I almost think George Lucas set out with Star Wars to be like, could I make a modern myth? If I were to take all this stuff that I've learned, would it work? And it totally worked.
Well,
Like
and I believe there's even a quote where he says something about his goal with Star Wars, right? Is creating something for a generation who grew up without mythology, who grew up without stories.
And I think, a perfect example of that is like George Lucas himself grew up on these old school, serials, westerns, a little bit of science fiction. And I think in the, late 60s, 70s, a lot of that sort of faded away or was disregarded sort of as like kids fare.
Mm-hmm.
I think we got into real grimy Chinatown, sort of dirty a look at the human side. And
Mm-hmm.
George Lucas realized that there hasn't been this sort of adventurous myth,
Mm-hmm.
and he just totally knocks it out of the park.
Yeah, he
And
does.
the rest is history. I mean, we don't have to talk about the impact Star Wars has had on our culture, but we can if we want because it's our show. And I mean, you think about just like so many things. Like there's Star Wars night at Dodger Stadium, or really sporting events around the world. May the 4th, Disney ended up purchasing Star Wars, but even before that, they had Star Tours at Disneyland and they, had the rights to the different characters. You think about lightsabers and spaceships and all the iconography that comes from Star Wars, Right here on my desk, I have a Millennium Falcon. If anybody watching can see this. Uh it's like, I don't know, it's just amazing the impact that Star Wars has had. I mean, even the characters of particularly Darth Vader and Yoda. I mean, you can see their silhouette and everyone knows who they are, even if you've never seen Star Wars.
I mean, that's totally true. There's a lot, and as you said earlier, there's a lot of stories that embody this hero's journey, right? Two you brought up, when we compare this to The Matrix or we compare this to Harry Potter, both of them follow the same structure, right?
Almost to a T.
Right? Harry Potter lives with his aunt and uncle in a ordinary, in this boring, ordinary world where he lives under the stairs.
Yeah.
And he receives a call to action, a letter. But he's not going to be able to go. His uncle won't let him go. And then Hagrid shows up.
Hagrid, comes, he takes him away.
And there's this extraordinary world of Hogwarts and witchcraft and wizardry and magic.
And it is like, you think about crossing the threshold. They literally go to platform 9 3/4. He crosses into Diagon Alley. Like, there's so much that just follows and adheres to this. You think of The Matrix. Neo initially refuses the call. He, is interested in meeting Morpheus, but he ends up, refusing. And then he comes back and it's, which pill do you want? And then he finally chooses. And then when he crosses the threshold, it's like, literally he touches that mirror and like crosses over. But what I wanted to get at, and you were hinting at this earlier, is thematically, like when you look at these stories, you look at the hero's journey, I think we run into the issue of people being like, does it create formulaic stories? Like, as a template, then, does it sort of ruin storytelling because we never get any original stories? And I would argue that it does not. I think the worlds that are created and the themes that the authors, whether it's, the actual writer or even a director, and what they're trying to convey is what makes each story unique. It's what makes each story different. What happens is actually different. I think the hero's journey maybe shows us a little bit about what will probably happen and maybe when, but that's the extent of it. What actually happens in The Matrix is way different than what happens in Star Wars or Harry Potter, and each world is so rich and unique. And then thematically, you start looking at what the authors are trying to convey. And it's like each story is its own unique thing, even though they all use this as a template. And to me, that suggests that you could tell hero's journey stories forever.
Well, and you bring up a good point, because aside from the themes, right, that the storytellers are using to try and convey through this tool, the archetypes are different. The number, how many threshold guardians does the hero encounter along the way? Sometimes you have a mentor who's also a shapeshifter, right? Sometimes you have a hero who himself is also his own shadow. And all these, as we start changing the pieces around, then stories really start to grow. But the important thing is understanding the basics. I think another interesting thing, and we had kind of mentioned this before when you and I were talking, the concept of this whole hero's journey, I don't think is anything new. I think it's, once we kind of learn it, we're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like, I've always felt that. I just didn't know that I didn't recognize it as a true formula, right? Well, but I've always felt it.
The most basic formula for storytelling of all time is beginning, middle, end.
Yeah.
Which you could probably just take the hero's journey and block it into those 3 sections.
These components, the beginning, world, the call to action, right? This is all first act stuff, right?
Yeah. First, second, third act, right? Like beginning, middle, end. It's probably the most formulaic. But it's weird because when you think of it this way and you actually break down the stories and see how they work, we all know this. I don't know. It's just like part of human culture. We all know how to tell a story. Now, it doesn't mean we're good storytellers, but we can all tell one. You know what I mean? Like I said, we could all tell a story tell me about the best Christmas gift you ever got. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to captivate us, but you could tell that story. And if you're really good at it, then it's the Red Ryder BB gun and you make a Christmas story.
Yeah, right.
But it might just be me asking you when we're, grabbing a beer. You would be able to tell me that. And it's like, it's so cool because if you really look at it and you tell me that, so where were you? And here's the ordinary world. And then maybe the fantastical world in this story is Christmas.
Mhm.
I was in Ohio, but then everything changed and it was magical because, I wanted to get this specific thing from Santa.
And I think what's interesting is when we understand it, we can also start to analyze why stories fail.
True. That's a good point.
And I mean, this isn't, beat up Storytellers Day, but, for example, everyone saw me rail against the movie Megapolis.
Yeah, we'll just start with one that's like, hey, not great.
And I mean, already we can see there, I mean, off the top of my head, Adam Driver's character has this incredible ability to stop time. He creates this mythological metal that kind of is fluid and changes shape, right? But the problem is we never see him in the world before he discovers this power. There's never a mentor who he meets that helps him unlock its potential. He just sort of has it. And because we don't see the character go through the steps of acquiring the knowledge, of acquiring the skill set, of challenging himself and overcoming it, it's really sort of just a throwaway plot device that is incredibly unearned. We don't see how it truly matters to the story as a whole or to the development of the character because he just wakes up one day and has it.
I mean, yeah, you could see where these elements they don't fit right. And it's almost like, again, the same way that we sort of understand exactly how it works. When it's not working, it feels off. It feels odd. They don't know how to tell the story. But it's like a feeling. I don't know how to describe it. But when you see it, you know it. You're like,
well, I mean, I think another good example is a lot of times we watch movies where people don't die, right? And we're like, he should have died, right?
Yeah.
That character should have died. It's not because you're evil. It's not because you're mean and sadistic. It's because you realize innately that for this character, for the hero to continue their journey and grow as they're supposed to and challenge themselves and go through the deepest, darkest, the inner cave moment that Campbell talks about, they need to do it alone. And that only happens if their mentor is no longer in the picture.
Yeah, and a great example, we talked about Star Wars, Obi-Wan dies, right? We talked about Harry Potter. But if you just look at the Sorcerer's Stone, like no mentor's dying in Sorcerer's Stone, or you look at the Matrix, Morpheus doesn't die, but he is. They are removed.
Morpheus is taken by Agent Smith.
Yeah, Morpheus is taken, and I think Dumbledore, at least in the book, I'm not sure how they play it in the movie, but in the book, he gets a summons. He gets a letter and he has to leave. And so he leaves Hogwarts unprotected. Again, it could be death, but it could be any number of things. But the point is, for the story to continue and Harry to have to step into that hero role, Dumbledore can't be there. Now, for some of these stories, the further you go down the road, Luke gets another mentor in Yoda, but he just passes away from old age. You look at Dumbledore and Harry Potter. As the mentor, he actually does get taken out. It's just in book 6, not in book 1. It happens sort of a little bit out of order. I mean, it happens, and we almost know it has to happen. I think that's what you're getting at, is like Dumbledore in particular. There's no world in which Harry Potter takes over the mantle of true hero if Dumbledore is still there at full power. There's just no way. There's because Harry will always defer to him.
And Dumbledore will always protect him.
Right. Dumbledore will always protect him. So like we sort of innately know Dumbledore has to go. He either needs to be handicapped in some way, driven mad or something, or die. Something has to happen to him because we just know that if he's here at full strength, Harry will never truly take up that mantle because he won't be forced to. He'll always defer out.
Well, and I mean, I think a good example of that is, right, when we look at the Lord of the Rings, right? For Frodo to truly deliver the ring and become the character that he is, Gandalf has to be gone. And yes, Gandalf dies and Gandalf returns, but from that moment on, Gandalf and Frodo are separated. They're on separate journeys.
Right, yeah.
He has to do his own thing without saying, Gandalf, where are we going? As he would at the beginning of the story.
I mean, here we are talking about Matrix, Harry Potter, and Star Wars. And then you have Lord of the Rings, which, I mean, run it through the hero's journey gauntlet of archetypes and steps along the way. And you're probably like, another perfect example of the hero's journey. That does it for our episode this week, CP. I mean, anytime we're talking about Star Wars, I'm having a blast.
I mean, obviously.
I feel like I could talk Star Wars forever, but I don't always make a lot of sense, and sometimes I ramble. So, that's why I don't have a Star Wars podcast. But if we get a chance to talk Star Wars, then I'm always. And in this case, with the hero's journey, I mean, I don't know if there's a better modern example of the hero's journey at work, creating a modern myth than Star Wars: A New Hope and George Lucas. So incredible conversation. I had so much fun. Well, for all of our listeners, be sure to continue the conversations. You can leave us comments on social media. You can shoot us DMs, whatever it is. And we'll be sure to highlight, some of our favorites. And then be sure to follow the show at filmmakerscompass.com, where we have links to all of our social media, as well as a feed of all previous episodes. You could follow me personally at Big Kid D-Man and CP.
You could follow me at NDCal5. Thank you for hanging out and talking about the hero's journey with us. And we will catch you back here next week. And until then, keep watching movies.